Welcome to the Power of ERDC podcast. I'm your host, Tim Reeves, and today we are joined by George Blaisdell, who at 3 years old built an igloo in the backyard of his Wisconsin home. Later, his mother caught him out there insisting on eating lunch in his newly constructed snowdrift shelter. Let's just say that was a precursor or an indication of what was to come. Today, after more than 30 trips to Antarctica, along with countless deployments to other austere environments across the globe, George has literally put his name on the cold region's engineering and sciences landscape map. Once a research engineer, or civil engineer rather, with ERDC's Cold Regions Research and Engineering Laboratory, or CREL, George later served in several capacities with the National Science Foundation, or NSF, including operations manager for the U.S. Antarctic program. Before his retirement, he was the chief program manager for the Antarctic Infrastructure and Logistics section of the NSF Office of Polar Programs. Today he is back with CREL and continuing to advance cold regions research. Sir, welcome.
Bo, thanks for having me.
I would expect the rest of this podcast to be far better than how I just read that. So I would think it'd go far smoother than my reading abilities there. So let's just start off with just a kind of a fundamental question that you are one of the world's experts in answering. Why is it important to conduct research in Antarctica? And why is it important that we have a constant engineering and science presence in that part of the world?
It's a very valid question. And certainly I get asked similar things with all the matters that are going on in the world and even in our country. You would think that our attention might be better spent doing other things. But Antarctica is fairly unique. It's one of our 7 continents on Earth, and it's the least explored. How many places do you think there are in the United States that haven't had foot set on them? Antarctica is probably 98%. Nobody's set foot on it. So it's natural for people to want to explore. But there are many other reasons that it's important. Climate is captured in past climate is captured in rock sediments and in ice. And in fact, ice traps more information quicker or more recently than do rocks and sediments. So there are very interesting reasons why it's a good place to explore. Also, it has the cleanest and the driest atmosphere, so it's a perfect place for astrophysics. It has a massive amount of ice. The average snow depth and ice depth is 2 miles. So it makes an ideal neutrino detector. But maybe more valuable to people is the fact that Antarctica contains 90% of the world's fresh water. And if that melts, obviously it's going to have a dramatic effect on sea levels. And also it's a loss of a freshwater source because all that will melt into the ocean and become saline.
So you've been to, like as we said before, to Antarctica more than 30 times in a wide spectrum of roles. Is there a particular research project or program that you feel best epitomizes your time on that continent?
Oh, like most people that have spent a career pursuing a particular interest, we hopefully become wiser with time, and wisdom is the accumulation of knowledge and experience. So I would have to say that what epitomizes my career is the most recent project that I've been a part of, because it's a collective of all the things that I've learned to do. Interestingly, this is a project in the Arctic. It's in Greenland, not Antarctica, but polar regions have a lot of similarities. This is a project that I've done with a team of people that are all experts in architecture, in design, in the psychology of remote living spaces, in modular design of super insulated structures. My role was to make sure that aspects of cold regions that aren't normally part of a curriculum or a field of study were paid attention to and were dealt with properly. So how to build a foundation on on a giant field of snow so that you don't have differential settlement. How to design modules and groups of modules so that you don't have snow drifting problems. Because if you got a snowdrift now, it doesn't melt and go away. It just gets worse over time. What to do to create redundancy and safety for people who there might be 5 people there for 150 days without access to the outside world. Internet, obviously, but if there's a medical problem, how do you deal with that? If there's a fire, how do you deal with that? How do you keep the rest of the people safe? What do you do if somebody passes away? How do you deal with that? So my role was to provide those little niche things that fall in between traditional engineering design and architecture and living space studies.
So, and for our listeners and viewers, you and I had an earlier conversation. I'm going off a little script, going off script here for a second. During our earlier conversation, you talked about your time in the operations management of McMurdo Station down in in Antarctica. You said it was. I think you described it as the challenges you had were widespread, from someone who had a medical issue to we're out of toilet paper or where are the bed sheets. Tell me a little bit about that time with the National Science Foundation and operations of McMurdo Station. How that what was that like?
It's uh it's not for everyone because you there's no script, there's no operations manual. You're dealing with people of all sorts. You're dealing with the world premier scientists on down to a a 20-year-old that wanted an adventure, and so they signed up to be a janitor, or somebody that's off grid that doesn't want to be found. So you're dealing with a wide range of people that have all different kinds of personality traits and all different kinds of trades or professional occupations, and everybody's down there and has to rely on each other. Um, and you have the typical kinds of things with behavior issues, with inappropriate behavior and legitimate crises. And not only ones that occur within your station in the US, but the international community that's in Antarctica works together. And at times you'll get a call on a radio that says that somebody's got an emergency somewhere and can you help? And so we scramble to create resources and send helicopters or small airplanes here or there, or research ships to take somebody off a tourist ship and bring them in so that we can fly them back to civilization. I- It's I like it because you never know from minute to minute what's going to come through the door, what's going to be on the telephone or the radio, and you have to use your wisdom, your knowledge of all things, including interpersonal actions, to create a solution. And commonly, you don't have a whole lot of time to do that. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you can make a call to off continent and get some advice from somebody. But at other times, you have to take the information that's available, look at the time frame. You have to make a decision and move out.
Well, one of the descriptors you gave me too is like being a mayor of a small town. So, um, so there you go.
So yeah, coupled with the principal of a middle schooler.
That should be on a T-shirt or on the placard of the desk.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that should be.
for those who may not know, logistics, and this is an obvious thing, logistics to and from Antarctica is an interesting challenge to say the least. Made easier by the construction of ice and snow runways, one of which is the Phoenix runway. What was your role in the design, testing, and construction of this runway, and that can support some of the military's largest cargo aircraft?
It's an interesting journey. I have a hard time telling a short story, so I'll make this as short as I can. But in 1989, one of my mentors at Krell had sold a project to NSF to create a wheeled runway on the um, McMurdo ice shelf, so that for the period of time when the sea ice couldn't support wheeled aircraft, we'd have access to typical kinds of aircraft, not just the specialized ski wheel Hercules. And I worked with him for part of a year on this project, and then he died unexpectedly. And so I inherited the project. I followed through with what his design was, found that it wasn't going to work the way he had envisioned, but that we could make it work a different way. And so I created the Pegasus runway. We knew that its lifespan was limited. It ended up lasting for 25 years, which is probably 15 more than I thought it would. But when it deteriorated, I had to look for another alternative because the program had become very reliant on having essentially year-round access with wheeled aircraft. Unfortunately, I couldn't find another glacial site just like where we put Pegasus, and so I had to move to a different technology, and that is a completely compacted snow runway. I'd had some experience with a couple of other things where I created really strong snow, and so I felt like we could actually do this. So with a team, I I I designed and constructed the Phoenix runway, and it's proven to be quite robust as long as maintenance is kept up, as long as people basically understand what makes it work and don't ignore little factors or little things that they might see that could lead to its deterioration.
So I think you had told me one time that, and I don't remember the ratio of how much fuel it is to use to bring fuel there, but really this is a lifeline. This runway is a lifeline for operations in Antarctica. Tell me about, if you can. So you do all this research, you do all this testing, you're validating your testing, but at some point you have to arrange or be a part of what is a C-17, a very large cargo aircraft, Air Force aircraft, and it has to test. It has to land on the runway for a first time. Tell me about that first time that this is planned and the emotions you have is like, okay, you can only test it so much before it actually has to work. What was that like?
Yeah, uh, it's uh, it's a serious thing, and I think a lot of researchers are their specialty or what they produce doesn't have these kind of pucker up moments. Most of the time you go stepwise in what you're developing, and at some point you can test it in such a way that you're not putting very expensive infrastructure or lives at risk. This is one of those things where at some point like you said, you have to land an airplane on this brand new thing. And I can say that many people in the Air Force chain of command associated with the pilots, the flight crews are like, there's no way this is going to work. And we don't want we want no part of this. And some of them came down and we demonstrated a few things. But the interesting thing is that the flight crews that know me, that know the program, that kind of see how things have been developing, many of them were like, "Get that equipment off the runway. I want to be the first one to land there." Uh, I and so you you have to manage both sides. You have to manage the skeptics as well as the people that are just overly eager to do something without fully knowing what the ramifications are. So I went through a lot of soul searching. I had one particular colleague that I worked with very closely, TJ Melendi. I think you interviewed him not too long ago, and he and I played sort of um, the devil's advocate with each other many times in the office late at night there, looking at our data and saying, what might we be missing here? Um, what if, and redoing our calculations. But at some point, you're right. You have to say, let's go. It's time to go. And at that point, I felt extremely confident. I had no qualms at all about it, and I had told the flight crews that I intend to be on the flight deck for that first flight because I didn't want them doing something that I wasn't willing to do myself. And at first there was the flight crews were fine with it, but there's certain rules about things, and having a civilian on board for a first is not usually something that's allowed, especially in the cockpit. But I was like, yeah, this has got to be. I want you all to know that this is how much confidence I have in this, that it's going to be fine.
Had they not let you on the aircraft, would you have stowed away? Would you have made sure you are?
No, I don't want to get crossways with folks. Yeah.
Um, so last year you were selected as a new member of the Explorers Club, and I'm going to read part of this. An international organization dedicated to the advancement of field research, scientific exploration, and resource conservation. And some of the names on this list, as I know you're, don't blush, or I know you're humble, but this is Sir Edmund Hillary and his Sherpa Tenzing Norgay, the first to reach the top of Mount Everest; Neil Armstrong, the first person to walk on the moon; and you, George Blaisdell, are in this club. How did this honor come about, and what were your feelings when you found out you had been named to the Explorers Club?
I was vaguely aware of the Explorers Club in the past, but I, like probably most people, assumed that it was for the, Thor Heyerdahls or Jacques Cousteau's or Neil deGrasse Tyson's of the world. Um, but one of the people that I've worked with in Antarctica for quite a while, he's an architect, and ironically, his office is in Honolulu, Hawaii. But he's done designs in McMurdo at South Pole and in Alaska. He's a member, and he's known about what I've done for quite a while because we've worked together on things. And he said, "Hey," he says, I want you to apply for membership in the Explorers Club." And I said, I don't- "What?" And he said that he was a member, and that the process is that a member has to nominate someone. He says, "I'd be happy to nominate you." So I thought about it for a while. We were at a meeting in Columbus, Ohio at the time, and a couple weeks later, I looked up the forms that he'd sent me, and I read through the questions that were asked that you have to answer, and I'm like, "Huh, mm, maybe I do fit in this group," because the questions were more like the dictionary definition of exploration, as opposed to what we tend to think of as the glamorous and glorified kinds of explorers. And it has to do with seeking new knowledge, finding new things, pursuing your curiosity. There's there's hundreds, maybe thousands of members of the Explorers Club that will will never be on TV. There'll never be a book written about them, but they're discovering new and interesting things. And all over the world. This isn't a US organization. So as I was filling out the form and answering the questions and saying, "Well, here's what I've done that's sort of new and different or first," and I thought, "Man, well, maybe." And then this particular colleague of mine and another colleague that I know is a member who found out I was applying, she said, "Oh, I want to write a letter for you too." And so it happened. So yeah,
There
I
you go. You're an
yeah,
explorer, and by the purest definitions. I mean, just in our time to
yeah.
talking and your career, I think it meets all, like you said, the dictionary definitions of explorer.
Mm.
The work you've done. One more into put an exclamation point on that conversation. One more accomplishment or honor we need to talk about is there is a geographic formation in Antarctica that sits 4,892 feet above sea level that is named for you, known as the Blaisdell Spur, in recognition of your scientific contributions and service both with ERDC and the National Science Foundation. How does it feel? And I know I've asked you a couple of questions about how does it feel, right? Feel landing, being part of the air crew to land on the ice runway and so forth and so on. Is how does it feel to have a portion of Antarctica named for you? When you look at the map, you're on it.
Yeah. Um, I feel um I feel honored, and I feel proud of the work that I've done that's led to this kind of recognition. It's um I know there are some people that whose goal is to have their name on this or that, or to be the first to do this or that. And um It's kind of easy for people with my personality to go, those people got the wrong motivation. I feel like my motivation has been much more um, low key, and the fact that the accumulation of these things has led to this kind of recognition is is very gratifying, but it doesn't make any difference to the rest of my life. I will say though that the thing that I am most uh, proud of in association with that, the recognition of having a geographic feature named after me is the last sentence in the citation. And this this for me is what my parents probably had as a goal, and this is kind of proof that it happened. The last sentence says, "He provided multifaceted service to the U.S. Antarctic program that consistently went well beyond expectations represented by his formal position description." And I I I take pride in trying to do that with everything I do in my life, whether it's volunteer work, whether it's being a parent, whether it's being a friend to somebody. Um, I I feel like I've been just massively blessed with opportunities and with talents, and that the least I can do is try to share that and to use it to benefit as many people as I can.
Well, I mean, this has been a look back memory lane in a lot of ways, but you have a trip to Antarctica set in the next few months. You will, I would imagine by the time this podcast is released, you will be in Antarctica. What are you doing now there, and what is next to just continuing this legacy that you have in cold region science and engineering?
So what I'm gonna be doing in Antarctica on this trip is right now we characterize the strength of the Phoenix runway using a very, very simple and very small tool. And even if we spend 10 hours taking measurements on the runway, we're only sampling 0.001% of the material that makes up the surface and the thickness of the runway. It's very tedious, and like I said, it's a very simple tool. It is a little bit prone to user differences, and that's we've made this work, but it's not the best way to characterize a pavement system, a runway system. In the rest of the world, they used to do something like this, but they've developed new technologies for how to do this faster, more reliably, and to get a bigger sampling area with every test. I'm going to be using one of these devices on our snow runway to find out how it works and what its numbers mean. And this is pretty interesting because the technology for this is called a falling weight deflectometer. It has been developed for airfields, conventional airfields, and conventional roads, and it works very well. Everybody understands it, but it's it's everything about it is designed for a conventional paving kind of system, not a granular surface. Nobody's used this on gravel roads, for instance. Well, they have a few times, but not with very much success. So the question is, will this work on snow? Now, I've done some laboratory tests, full-scale laboratory tests, so I know that it works. What's interesting is that snow develops its strength in a very different way than a traditional gravel or pavement system. So the numbers that we get out of this machine, this falling weight deflectometer, might when put in the framework of how this device has been used elsewhere, it might say, "Oh man, this is way too weak." But we already know from the simple tool we use and from the fact we're landing C-17s, 600,000-pound C-17s on it, that it is strong enough. So what I'm doing is finding out, one, can we characterize the snow pavement system with this falling weight deflectometer? And two, if we can, do the numbers that it produce, how are those, uh, in reference to the numbers that would be achieved for the same level of strength on a concrete pavement or an asphalt pavement? So again, it's interesting. It's advancing the state of snow technology, snow engineering.
Well, let's pull that thread as we get ready to wrap up here, and let's talk about snow engineering. Let's go back to that 3-year-old igloo, okay? And you said at one point you had a picture that that you may come across one day. Is as a preeminent expert in snow ice construction and engineering, looking back at that igloo you built at 3 years old, how does it stand up? How would you criticize, or how would you characterize the igloo you built at 3?
Mm-hmm. It was more like a snow cave. We had a picket fence, and at one of the places in the corner of it, uh, the prevailing wind and snow drifts created a big pile right there. And I used to slide down it. I remember that. And then at one point I thought, well, what would happen if I dug a hole in there? So I did. And it was like, yeah, this is pretty nice in here. You could sort of see light through it, through the snow. You're protected from the wind. It wasn't that cold. It's be sitting in there. And so, yeah, I thought, well, this is pretty nice. I can't create any direct links between that experience as a kid and where I ended up. But I will say that when I did my bachelor's degree in geology at Northern Illinois University and graduated at the time, all those jobs were in the oil industry, and they meant going to Oklahoma or Texas or Louisiana. And I knew I didn't like it hot. I was like, no way. So I was like, okay, what do you do if you don't want to take a job after your bachelor's degree? You go to grad school, right? So I went from Northern Illinois University to Michigan Technological University in Houghton, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And that first winter I was there, they got 400 inches of snow, and I just thought, this is my world. I love this. And many of the classes that I took had reference materials coming from Krell. And so when I graduated from there, or was about to, I asked a couple of my professors who had done contract work for Krell, what do you think about, how would I go about getting a job at Krell? And they facilitated that. And it was, like I said, it was fascinating, and hit all my curiosity buttons.
Yep, and off you went. So
Yeah.
let's
So
be
here I
wrong.
am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listen, sir, I know you told me not to call you sir, call you George, sir. I will say that. Like I said, that's built in by my mother, so I will not apologize for that. But thank you for the time. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the work, the legacy, the impact that you've made, your career has had and continues to have. And I appreciate the time.
Well, I appreciate your asking these questions and allowing me to share some of my experiences, and hopefully stimulate or encourage other people to follow their curiosity wherever it might be. But there aren't too many snow and ice engineers, and someday I'll call it quits. So I need some people to follow.
Well, on the website powerverdictpodcast.org, we're gonna have some photos of George that we've pulled up, and have, by the way, one of the best photos of anybody that I've interviewed had a chance to, just the in full Arctic gear and the ice forming on you. It looks, if a photo can look cold, that photo looks cold. So but we'll be able to put that on the website, and ask that you go there for more information on the work that he's done and is continuing to do. So with that, I say thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.